Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. This is the regular Board of Education meeting for Monday, March 27, 2017. And we'd like to get started. We're already a few minutes late, so we'd like to get moving here. So we'll jump right to it, get right onto the agenda. And the first item on the agenda tonight will be simply to call the meeting to order and to recite the vision statement. And the vision statement is: every school will be a thriving school that prepares every student to graduate from high school, college, career, and community ready. So again, welcome, and we'll get moving here and move right through. We have quite a bit of business to take care of tonight. So next item on the agenda, we would like to recognize a few people here. And so we have some recognitions to do. The first one, the Board of Education would like to recognize Alize Anderson, a 7th grade student at Wright Middle School, one of the 53 state winners of the Doodle for Google competition. So please join us on the stage. So you can join us on the stage. So let me just say a few words here. Again, Alice is a 7th grade student at Wright, is one of the 53 state winners of the Doodle for Google competition. Now, the theme of this year's competition was What I See for the Future. And Alize's doodle, New Life for the Extinct, depicts the return of extinct animals. She spent about 30 hours creating her doodle, which was selected from thousands of entries received this year. Students and staff at Wright helped Alize celebrate during a surprise assembly on February 23rd. Congratulations again for being chosen as a winner in the Doodle competition. So once again, I think we owe her a hand of applause. Another demonstration of the great students we have here at MMSD. Okay, well, we also like to recognize a couple of our own tonight. We would like to recognize two of our own, and they are Michael Flores and Ed Hughes, who have served on the Board of Education with invaluable insight, genuine compassion, and unwavering commitment to our students. They have been tireless advocates for our students and families. Tonight, we thank them for their many years of dedicated service. No, we always say a few words, but words can't really express our appreciation for the dedication you all have served over the years. And we do really appreciate it. And there's some big shoes to fill, and we don't look to fill them, we just look to replace. And so we really appreciate you guys' service. So I'd like to continue here with the reading of a couple of resolutions.
Before I read the resolution on behalf of the board, I would like to just thank Ed personally, and not only for his board service, but it was about 6 years ago that I received an email completely out of the blue from someone I had just crossed paths with a few times, and it was from Ed Hughes. And he knew of my work in the schools at East High and others with the Avid Tops program, and reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in running for the school board. and I pretty much hit reply and was typing no, and then I stopped, and I thought, you know what, at least give it a shot. And I went and talked with Ed, and not only has he served on the school board, but he is always looking on how we can make the district and serve our students and our families better and better. So I wouldn't be here tonight and wouldn't have served the last almost 6 years if Ed hadn't sent that email and reached out. So thank you, Ed. Whereas Ed Hughes was elected to the Board of Education in April 2008, served as president for the 2013-14 school year, served as chair of the Operations Work Group for the last 3 years, and served with distinction for all 9 years. And whereas Ed Hughes has been a valuable member to MMSD over 9 years and a strategic advocate for public education in Madison. And whereas Ed Hughes served as the board's representatives on the Schools of Hope Leadership Committee, the Foundation for Madison's Public Schools, the City Education Committee, served as the legislative co-liaison and as the board liaison to every school in the district over his tenure. And whereas during his service on the board, Ed Hughes' deep knowledge of budget, finance, and the state budget process has helped Madison schools immensely. And whereas he spearheaded the recent referendum to exceed revenue limits, as well as the agreement the district made with the City of Madison on TID 25. And whereas Ed Hughes' leadership has been instrumental in our district's academic progress, and whereas Ed Hughes has earned the respect of the superintendent, staff, families, and board colleagues with whom he has served. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Madison Metropolitan School District Board of Education recognizes and thanks Ed Hughes for his years of excellent and dedicated service. Be it further resolved, this statement be permanently imprinted in the Board of Education minutes for the meeting of Monday, March 27th, 2017. Thank you.
Stand
all
up.
right, great.
So we do, that's it, yeah. Hey, stand up and shake your hand, guys. We still have to stand up. Yeah, okay. And our next honoree tonight is Michael Flores. And I'd like to read Michael's resolution. Whereas Michael Flores was elected to the Board of Education in 2014, served on both the Operations and Instruction Work Groups, and served with distinction for all 3 years. And whereas Michael Flores has been a tenacious advocate for all students and families. And whereas Michael Flores served as the board's representative on MSCR's advisory committee and as the Student Senate co-representative. And whereas during his service on the board, Michael Flores has been steadfast in his advocacy for dual language immersion, student athletics, and out-of-school time opportunities for kids. And whereas Michael Flores has provided great insight into bilingual education, athletics, and recreation, and with his support, we developed and approved a new plan for English language learners, as well as developed a set of recommendations and actions to improve athletics. And whereas Michael Flores' leadership has been influential in our vision to provide opportunities for all, and whereas Michael Flores has earned the respect of the superintendent, staff, families, and board colleagues with whom he has served. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Madison Metropolitan School District Board of Education recognizes and thanks Michael Flores for his years of excellent and dedicated service. Be it further resolved, this statement be permanently imprinted in the Board of Education minutes for the meeting of Monday, March 27, 2017. Well, we're going to miss you guys. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll try to continue here. Again, words can't explain the appreciation we have here for the years of service. So we'll try to move on here. Next item on the agenda: approval of minutes. Motion. I move that the Board of Education. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll continue to move on. Next item on the agenda appears to be Board President's announcements and reports. So, did we miss public appearances? Public appearances. I tell you, I guess I'm shaking up here a little bit. All right. Okay, we do have some speakers tonight, and all our speakers know the ground rules, but if you don't remember them, you have 3 minutes. Please try to adhere to your 3 minutes. I'll call up a speaker, and I'll call the second one, and please make way down to the podium there and be ready to speak at the conclusion of the first speaker. So you have 3 minutes, and first speaker tonight is Beth Iser, followed by Gary Peterson. Beth, followed by Gary Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Beth Esser, and I'm a parent in the district. I've been thinking a lot about immigration issues in our country since the presidential election. Debates around immigration are not new, but for me, what is new is my son's enrollment at Nuestro Mundo Community School. This school is filled with a wonderfully diverse staff, diverse mix of students and staff from many different countries. When Miles started, my husband and I were excited for the opportunity for him to learn a new language, but what we didn't realize was the richness of cultural experiences Miles would also gain at Nuestro Mundo. Nuestro Mundo and MMSD benefit greatly from staff who can provide native language instruction to its diverse student body. The recent Dual Language Immersion Summit emphasized this point as the high school student panel revealed that one of the needs at the DLI level in the high school is to have more native Spanish language instructors. Students emphasized how much they had gained from having native language teachers in elementary school, both for the language and learning about the culture. I am here tonight to encourage the board and MMSD to take the steps necessary to offer immigrant staff who have work visas and have a desire to become citizens the employee sponsorship to do so. Fewer and fewer employers offer a path to citizenship for employees who have work visas. From what I have learned, it appears that MMSD does not have a policy against this, but does not routinely do it. Our student body reflects a diverse, multicultural world that we take great pride in. The benefits immigrant staff bring to our schools are numerous, and offering a path to citizenship is what a fair and just employer should do. This will also provide stability in our schools and for our staff. I want to draw attention to a particular group of immigrants, those we refer to as Dreamers, and have deferred action for childhood arrival status, or DACA permits. As of now, DACA does not offer a pathway to citizenship. It allows people to live like citizens by contributing to this country in many different aspects, but after 2 years, they need to reapply and still do not have a path to citizenship. Given that many DACA recipients have lived their whole lives here and already are citizens in every sense of the word, I feel very strongly that MMSD should do all that it can to offer any staff with DACA work permits to transfer their status so they can begin a path to citizenship. The day after the election, parents came into Nuestra Mundo and wrote signs up and hung them all over school. The signs read, "At Nuestra Mundo, all are safe, all are welcome, all are loved." I would now add one more. All are valued. And I do believe these principles apply throughout MMSD, and I appreciate what MMSD has done to support our immigrant families, and I think this would be one more step to support our immigrant staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Gary Peterson, followed by Hung Train.
Good afternoon. I provided a handout somewhere. I don't know if you've been passed out, but they're up there in front somewhere. My name is Gary Peterson. I am a consultant, but I am here on my own. I'm not representing anyone. And I'm here to advocate that this school district get together with other school districts to amend the state law, state TIF law, so that schools become an eligible activity.
Talk a little more in,
just
Gary?
as public works
Talk a
are.
little
Talking to the mic, lean up to the mic a little bit, please.
I'm not talking in the mic.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I've worked in the TIP program all over Wisconsin as a consultant for a number of decades. And I've always noticed there, actually when I started and when the law was written, as you can see under 1 and 2, where schools are specifically prohibited. Funding of schools was different in those days. There was no levy limits, and it was may have been at least easier to do bond referendums. But the certain thing is that there is no reason in the statutes currently why schools couldn't be funded under TIF. And what you would be advocating for is in 2, you just cross out school buildings, and I don't write legislation. They may be needed to be added under 3A, but you basically take them from being a prohibited use and have them be a permitted use. Item 3 lists project costs, things that are eligible, and you'll see that they're quite expansive, particularly under 3A, where you can build buildings, you can rehab buildings, you can do all kinds of things with TIF funds. And this, you would not be generating the TIF. Private development would be generating the funds to be used to fund the school improvements. 4 on here indicates that the building wouldn't even necessarily have to be in the TIF district, can be within 1/2 mile under the current statutes. And 5 is the idea that you do need to write a project plan when you create a TIF district. And you would need to include school rehabilitation or construction, even if you weren't going to do it for 10 years. Now, if you weren't going to do it for 10 years and you didn't want to include it, you can do amendments to the TIF law to include it. And timing would be an element that you would need to work on. Is this something that needs to be done right away, or is it something that can wait? It's just an opportunity that I think that you ought to see about getting the law changed so that you, in fact, can participate in the program. We use TIF to create dwelling units, Section 42 or all kinds of other things, which create additional students. So the tie-in would be that if we're going to permit housing be an eligible activity and be constructed within a TIF district, then we need to expand schools, improve schools, construct schools. So I just see no reason why it under the law it couldn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. On Train, followed by Libby Meister.
Good evening. My name is Hong Tran. I'm proud principal of Badger Rock Middle School. I spoke with you earlier in December. I told you about the story of Badger Rock. I'm here to tell part 2 of what we've been up to and what we want to do in the next big steps. Since you last saw me, we've continued our highly collaborative teams in our teacher teams, SBLT, Governance Council, family, and even in between schools. We've hosted the district's first family, youth, and community engagement with over 300 attendees. We started a student-based leadership team. Every other Thursday, I got 5, 6 boys in my office telling me what's wrong with the school, what's right with the school, and what we need to do to make it better. We have a whole school focus on literacy. Starting with disciplinary literacy strategies and also the critical reading process. And finally, we killed the fall to winter reading map scores. We were the highest middle school in our reading scores. So that's what we've been up to. Our next steps here. We want to promote deeper and connected learning through our project-based learning framework in the context of urban agriculture. We want to continue to bolster school-wide literacy practices, especially focusing on students who are not at proficiency. And then hiring a literacy coach and reading interventionist to do so for next year. We believe that reading helps students make sense of the world. That's why we're focused on that. And finally, actually 2 more points. We're going to be engaged in the vision for what a Badger Rock Scholar looks like. Not just the content, but we're going to find inspiration from our core values, from 21st century learning skills, and from the graduate vision to really detail what a Badger Rock Scholar should leave, the skills and attributes they should leave with us by the time they leave our school. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. When Jen came to our district, she engaged in a visioning that said all students are prepared for a college, career, and community. The word all, ALL, stands true to me. This is why I remain in Madison, because we're committed to every single student, and we're not done until every single student can graduate college, career, and community ready. And the students there at Badger Rock, between Rimrock Road and Badger Road, they cannot be forgotten, and they have been forgotten, and we're here to hold them up along with the rest of Madison kids to make sure that while we do school, that we do it for them too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Libby Meister.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to see you. Thank you, Michael and Ed. I'm so profoundly thankful and grateful for the work you've done for our district. Thank you for your leadership as a board, as a whole in our community during this very challenging time. Many students and families are struggling with uncertainties and challenges that most of us will never know. I appreciate Dr. Cheatham's leadership at the district level and our principal, Josh Forehand at Westermunda Community School, their leadership regarding issues related to immigrant families. The messages of inclusion and respect are appreciated and needed. As a former NMI board member, I'm also extremely proud of the steps that NMI has taken to support our immigrant community and school families. I'm here to ask you to fully consider the important role immigrants can play in the success of our school and community. Please consider the ways immigrants, dreamers one and all, are filling in the needs of our schools from the cafeteria to the classroom. I don't claim to be an employment or immigration expert, but I know that we're always looking for people who have language skills and prioritize growing our own. I hope that the district's participation in visa programs that allow immigrants to work lawfully in the U.S. can be further explored and expanded. Please use all appropriate programs, including visas, to employ immigrants. In a time of great challenge, we find great opportunity. We learn who we can trust and who we can rely on. I appreciate that our school district's leadership is modeling for others. Please don't shy away from taking bold steps, using these great opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our speaking portion of the meeting for tonight. Thanks to all our speakers. And we'll continue to move on. And the next item on the agenda will be board president's announcements and reports. First announcement for tonight. O'Keefe teacher honored as GSAFE Educator of the Year. O'Keefe Middle School teacher Abigail Sweats has been named the GSAFE Educator of the Year for the state of Wisconsin. GSAFE, which stands for Gay Straight Advocates for Education, is an organization that increases the capacity of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning students, educators, and families to create schools in Wisconsin where all youth thrive. The award is given to a Wisconsin K-12 educator who has demonstrated a commitment to promoting just and respectful schools for all, with an emphasis on LGBTQ and youth and topics. Thank you, Abigail, for your vision and passion for our students and staff. Congratulations for the award. Is Abigail here by any chance? No, okay. All right. Marquette principal chosen as WEMTA Administrator of the Year. Congratulations to Marquette Elementary Principal Pam Wilson. Principal Wilson received the 2017 WEMTA Administrator of the Year Award. The award is given by the Wisconsin Educational Media and Technology Association each year to an administrator whose support has impacted the school library program. Principal Wilson has been a passionate supporter of Marquette Library Program, championed initiatives, and taken an active role in library events. Thank you, Principal Wilson, for your support of school libraries. And Memorial Student wins Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year Award. Madison Memorial Senior Rehawk Amin has been named the Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year for Wisconsin. She is the first ever member of the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County to represent Wisconsin at the regional competition in Chicago. As the statewide winner, Rehawk will receive more than $30,000 in scholarships. Congratulations. More great work coming out of MMSD. And that, once again, concludes Board President's announcements and reports. So, next on the agenda, we will have superintendent's announcements and reports. And Madam Superintendent.
All right, thank you. Speaking of great things happening at MMSD, I've got some staff who are going to join me for this presentation. I'll welcome you up to the table now. Such as Cindy. Welcome. Take a seat, guys. If you want it, yeah. Hey, Kristen. All right, now that everyone is settled, we are excited to share with you a little more about some work we've been doing in the area of professional development for the schools that receive intensive support on literacy in our district. Cindy Green, our head of curriculum instruction, is here. Yet again, Tamara Maxwell, who is the head of our literacy department. Tamara, you may want to do a little wave so they know who you are. This is Tamara's first time speaking with the board. And she's been doing phenomenal work as the director of our literacy department. So I'm thrilled to get to highlight her. And then we have some staff members from Lindbergh and Sherman. We have Quinn Marks, an instructional coach at Lindbergh. We have Dawn Michaels, a third grade teacher at Lindbergh. We have Kristen Foreman, the principal of Sherman, and Marty Moe, the instructional coach at Sherman. We're thrilled to have them here, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it right over to Cindy to get us going. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes, and then really looking forward to taking any comments or questions.
Good evening. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. One additional person that I just wanted to acknowledge, Lindsay Maglio, who is the principal at Lindbergh, she's in the audience. She's not up here, but I also wanted to just acknowledge Lindsay as she's here supporting her staff. So excited to have her. So I'm really looking forward to being able to kind of talk through one of our approaches to intensive support schools and an additional piece that we added on this year, which is around learning labs. And I think that word learning is really key because that's kind of the work that we've been doing with teachers, is about how do we think about what we're learning in professional development and apply it into the classroom as we are really building this collaborative culture, as you see in this quote here. Something new is we've really been trying to get away from this idea of stand and deliver professional development that we know is not in the best interest of teachers learning. And so how we have done that is we've created a new structure that we are implementing in K-5 schools and in middle schools. And it's this idea of teachers receiving professional development just like they would around a new strategy or new content. Maximizing our coaching support from our instructional coaches, looking at what's happening during teacher teams and planning from that learning that they had in professional development. But then most importantly, the center of this is about the learning lab, where the teachers are taking that learning from the professional development and from what they've planned in teacher teams and going into their classroom and applying it in front of their students. So they're actually modeling for other teachers in front of children the learning that they have received from the literacy department or from their instructional coach. There's no better opportunity to practice what you've learned than in front of kids. So we're really excited about what we've started this year. I'm going to pass it on to Tamara, and she's going to kind of go through a little more of the structure.
All right. Thanks, Cindy. So we're using these labs to raise student achievement with our continuous focus on strengthening core instruction directly with teachers in their individual buildings as we engage in the great teaching cycle of plan, teach, reflect, and adjust. So there are a lot of great things about the Learning Lab, which you'll be able to hear from our teachers and coaches and principals. But something that really has stood out through the Learning Labs is how it's created this space for teachers to share their practice with their colleagues and to really reflect on the intentional planning and that intentional teaching practice, and really to see how that intentional focus on instruction and that intentional focus on planning is impacting student learning. So as the instructional leader, the principal has been involved in the planning of the Learning Labs as well as learning alongside their teachers. This has allowed them great insight into how the professional learning system supports their school's goals. And you'll be able to hear a little bit more about that in just a minute. So the Learning Labs occur once a semester, and it follows that whole group professional development. Two design features that have been particularly impactful have been this idea of having English language arts teachers, special education teachers, and English language learners teachers working together in these Learning Labs. So we have co-serving teachers that are co-planning together, co-delivering instruction together, and reflecting together. So when we think about serving all of our students, we're learning together side by side instead of having separate professional development for these teachers. So it's really bringing that co-planning and co-serving together in a very authentic context. Another design feature that's been really impactful is this idea of these planning meetings. So prior to the Learning Lab, the literacy department will come out to the school, we'll meet with the principal and the partner, and we'll talk through what were the objectives of the professional development and how are they intersecting with the school's goals. So what are your SIPS goals, and how can we use these to really leverage what you have going on in your building? So it doesn't feel like it's that you're doing something different, that it feels like it is seamless professional learning. So those two pieces have really stood out when we think about the design features of the Learning Lab. So on the day of the Learning Lab, teachers come together and they work together in grade level teams. In K-5, we're working in banded teams where K-1 teachers are working together, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you start to see that vertical collaboration too. So kindergarten teachers are starting to see, oh, that's what's happening in first grade. Or first grade teachers are like, oh, I can build on the routines that you've established in kindergarten. So we're starting to see how we can build on each other's practice. So the Learning Labs happen in these grade level teams, and they start with these planning coaching conversations. We're really leveraging that great teaching cycle, and we start with that planning coaching conversation. That planning coaching conversation sets the context for what we're going to see in the demonstration lesson. So after that, we go into the demonstration lesson, we watch the demonstration lesson, and we're really watching for what are the teacher moves, and how are those teacher moves impacting student learning? And so we'll observe and we'll take notes. Then we take those notes back and we reflect on that. And so we reflect on that through rounds, and it's through that process then, that reflection process, that individual teachers will establish, these are my next steps. I'm really feeling inspired about this is my next move. And then all of the teachers collectively say, okay, now that we've identified that, what are we going to do as a grade level team? And so it's not only individual teachers stepping into their next move, but also how is the team moving forward in their teacher teams for professional development.
Speak a little closer to the mic.
Oh, thank you.
People out there have to hear too.
And now I'm just in time, so thank you.
Like, you really got to be 3 or 4 inches. So.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So, so now I'm going to just hand it off to Lindbergh, actually, so you can hear from from Quinn, our coach, and from Dawn, our third grade teacher.
Scooch over one seat, so, yeah. I just feel like Dawn is so far away. There we go.
All right. I think so. Good evening. Our experience at Lindbergh this year with site-based learning labs has been really positive. While many of us, classroom teachers and myself included, were anxious about the new process, learning labs proved to be an effective way for us to connect what was happening in professional development, the work in our grade level teams, and also the work that I was doing with teachers in coaching cycles. It really provided an opportunity to make our learning visible, to pause and reflect on our work, and then really just to celebrate the work that we're doing. For the last Learning Lab, 2 of the 3 host teachers had just completed an 8-week coaching cycle with me. I felt like this worked really well because the teacher and I were used to planning and working together, and the planning that we did for the site-based learning lab really wasn't any different than the weekly planning that we had been doing already, but it did allow us to go a little bit deeper in thinking about just one lesson. So in preparation for the labs, I met with each host teacher for about an hour, and we really thought about what it was that we wanted students to know and be able to do. From there, with that learning target, we created a task that often incorporated a graphic organizer, language frames. We thought through the process steps that students would need to engage in service to that learning target. And then we were really able to have the time then to, in detail, think through the demonstration, the think aloud with a specific text. And so it felt like all of the planning that we were doing was really intentional, and we were thinking about formative assessment that we had been collecting with our students prior to that lesson. So on the day of the lab, classroom teachers and support staff not only saw that lesson in action, but they also had time to reflect on instruction and also thinking about student learning and student engagement during the lesson. Host teachers felt really affirmed in their practice to have other teachers naming what it was that they saw them doing. And all the teachers participating in the lab identified a next step for themselves and their grade level team. We do ongoing walkthroughs in our school, and so following our last learning lab, we got into classrooms and we saw several teachers who had been a little more hesitant to try on some of the new learning or the new practices really take on some of that learning in ways that they hadn't done before. And I think it's really powerful for teachers to see it in context, to see it from their colleagues, and from that they were just more willing to try themselves. Thank you.
I'm Dawn Michaels. I'm the third grade teacher. I was the one that was selected to do the teaching-based learning. So along with Quinn, it was just a seamless process. Like she said, that we had been coached and talked quite a bit through our lessons. So it just was a seamless process. It did allow us to dig really deeper into my teaching. Prior to this, I've had a lot of coaching and I was able to watch good teaching from the coaching, but this really forced me into doing more thinking about what I was going to be delivering to my students. So it was really beneficial, even though it was a little nerve-wracking. But it was, like Quinn said, it was just seamless, and so it just seemed like a normal lesson. And with the coaching that I received, I really knew what I was going to be doing, that I was able to block out all the adults that were in the room, and the kids were able to focus on the lesson as well. And the whole process was beneficial to go back and listen to my colleagues here and point out things that sometimes I just do automatically and I don't really think as intentional moves to help instruction, were pointed out that I am doing those things. Sometimes we hear a lot of information, and so how do we apply it? And it was just reaffirming to know that I am doing those steps that we're looking to do. And so hearing the next steps too was very beneficial, just to help me process through the lesson, just to know what my next steps were going to be, and just to hear from my colleagues things that I might not have thought of, and then to be able to really apply it into my next lessons. And it's always now in the back of my head, now that I've gone through the process, it's always there in the back of my head of how I'm going to be using these moves into other lessons as well. So it was a very beneficial process.
Great, thanks. So I think we also want to hear from Marty and Kristen and hear kind of from the middle school lens, a little different in terms of what they've taken away. So I'm going to turn it over to Marty and to Kristen.
All right. Good evening. So first of all, I want to say thanks to the department, the literacy department. I think this opportunity and pushing us as a school to really open up our doors, have our teachers pause and open up their doors and welcome each other in is something that was really beneficial to us. So it was really great having that support, and Bobby from their team came out and she spent a lot of time working with me and others. So I think that was beneficial as well. It's a great experience. Teachers really enjoyed the process once they got into it. It was a positive uncomfortableness, I think, that they had, right? But what they did appreciate was the alignment. So what Tamara mentioned earlier, how there was the PD that they gave and provided our teachers, how that really tied into the learning lab. So I think that was something, when they can see how it all fits together, it makes a lot of sense and makes it more worthwhile. You know, and then just the opportunity for our teachers to begin to collaborate and really think about what they wanted to highlight in their lessons, you know, stopping and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have 20 minutes where everyone's watching me. What is it that I'm going to do to make it all fit together? I think that was a good moment for them. Really, it benefited the hosts, the teachers who were hosting, but I think it also really benefits those teachers who got to observe. You know, they got to see the coaching conversation that I had with our host teachers, where they were hearing what those teachers were thinking about when they were making their lesson plans, why those learning targets, what were the moves that they were going to make, you know, what were they going to do to support students who are struggling, how are their teammates or their colleagues going to support them. So I think that was really useful, as well as like letting them know, like, I want you to watch for this as I'm teaching, because I'm kind of struggling in this area, and what's your insights that, you know, you might be able to provide me. And then the actual observation, they got to see how the teachers were using the new materials that we have this year, how they were modifying and supplementing them. They also got to see how the teachers were scaffolding for teachers, and how they were able to do things that they didn't think were possible in their building, right? But it actually can happen right down the hall. And at other times when something challenging happened, how did they react to it, I think. So all of that was really good. And then the debrief, as they mentioned, was really useful. I think for a lot of the teachers, it was really surprising hearing how everything came together, how there's so many different pieces that go into teaching a class. In 20 minutes, there's 15, 20 different things that the different teachers are noticing that you did. I think that was something that was really amazing for everyone.
Hello. Going to kind of mirror some of the things that were already talked about, but from my perspective, just really creating a culture. Of course, this is my second year at Sherman, and really creating a culture where we want to have true collaboration in the building. So that involves opening up our classrooms, which at times is uncomfortable, which I appreciate the honesty with that is a bit uncomfortable for people. But I think this process, the structure of it, the flexibility of it really created that culture in the building for us. Also, some of the things Marty talked about in relation to, I've seen this in PD, I think I can do it in my classroom, but I really need to see it in action in order to feel comfortable with it. So opening up those classrooms really allowed those teachers that time to be able to see that in action and how that can be done. One of the most, I believe, there were a lot of powerful parts, but one of the real powerful parts was the coaching conversation that happened in the beginning, along with the coach and the teacher that was actually displaying their lesson. To be able to go through that coaching conversation, the teacher to really talk about their way of thinking and how they thought about their kids and very intentional about their planning was very powerful during that process. At Sherman, we actually love this process so much that we put in a request to have additional support from central office in order to kind of recreate a hybrid version of this in our school. How can we make this go not just 2 times a year, but continuous throughout the year, even with math, ELA, and other subjects in this building? So we're really excited about getting that off the ground. Another important part was the support we actually received from central office before we actually had the learning lab. The fact that they came in and actually planned with us, and it wasn't this is what we're going to do when we come in based off the PD, really making it relevant to what's in our SIP, and actually getting your feedback to tailor it to what your school needs. One of the things that I was really big on the next time they come in is really looking at how teachers are planning, being very culturally relevant. So next time that they come to Sherman, along with our SIP focus, we're also going to be taking a look at that. So I think another important part for the principal was to make sure, even though I know there's a lot going on in the building, is to make sure that I was also there at some of the PDs and also present at each learning lab. That was a huge part to making sure I believe this was successful at Sherman.
So thank you, Lindbergh. Thank you, Sherman, so much. At this time, we open it up if you have any questions or just want to ask any more additional information to our fabulous guests that are here.
TJ.
It sounds like some really good things going on, and it sounds like that both our staff and students are benefiting greatly from it, and that inspires this question, which is, how much of our other PD could we get rid of and shift towards school-based and learning lab and collaborative work? I mean, it's, you know, this is learning from peers, learning with peers, building professional learning communities. All those things are both what makes better teachers, improves learning, and also creates school cultures that contribute to retention, contribute to better school climate. And you constantly hear complaints about PD that is useless. And I understand that a lot of work goes in and some of this stuff is required and some of it that, you know, some things you can't shift to this model, right? And so I guess the question is that, you know, are we thinking about, can we shift? Can we go from 30-70 to 50-50 or whatever? Are we thinking along those lines? Anybody?
Yeah, I don't
Can we get the stage lights back up, please?
And I guess I'm talking about, kind of both staff time and dollars would be kind of the two measures that I work with.
I would say, maybe more the central office before school now, that I think it is critical the more that you can do. I think you need both. I think it's useful for teachers to get out and, one, talk to teachers from other schools and hear what's going on. But there's information that you can get as a big group, but I think it is important. And this model is really useful because when you do bring it back to the school and it makes our teachers or allows our teachers to really sit together and plan, absolutely. I think the more you can do that, the better.
I would say that this year it's been more beneficial hearing what the big idea is and then bringing it back down into the school and then being able to sit with my coach and then really think about how to apply it in the classroom, and then seeing it in action has been, I've learned more in this process than in any other process.
I would also add that just in crafting our SIP, we made sure that everything was aligned. So the professional development that we've been getting from the literacy department is in direct alignment with what's happening in grade level teams. It's in direct alignment with what's happening in coaching cycles, and then having the learning labs as an opportunity to open the doors and have everybody see that. So it's just, this, I think, year has really shown that all of those pieces, if you do plan intentionally for your school improvement, that they all are working together toward one goal.
I mean, I would just add, TJ, that we have really been trying to move away from a model of professional development that we know doesn't work. And I think we, as a large group of educators, have keyed into, and I think we're not figuring this out in isolation. We're watching it, what others are doing as well. But it's about this, your term about balance is right. We think that teachers and all educators need injections of new knowledge. So you need some, right, external support and learning new things about your practice. That's really important to have happen regularly. But that in of itself is never going to work. You need time and space to actually plan, not planning time that gets taken over by other pseudo-professional developments, but real intentional planning time. We do think we need the support of an instructional coach, which is about very individualized professional development. And I think we're discovering that this learning lab idea, this is kind of like the missing piece that brings all those components together. So I don't know that we've got the balance quite right. Some schools are, I think we're trying to figure out school by school where the balance lies. But keep in mind that the central office doesn't determine the professional development plan for a school. In the SIP, every school develops their own site-based professional development that includes every one of those components. So it looks a little different in every school, as it should. The exception is the schools that receive intensive support this year have been getting some common professional development around literacy and what it means to work with adolescents at the middle school level. So there is some commonality in the schools that receive intensive support when it comes to the more traditional professional development component. But outside of that, it's a school-based plan. Yes. Okay.
I just brought this slide back up because I think this slide clearly articulates exactly what Jen just said, and I think that there's a balance. But I think we're still learning as we go and seeing not only what works for our schools, but what also is going to work in different content areas and different contexts. But the idea of a balance, I think, is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah. Following up on that, is there thought given to allowing the non-intensive support schools to have learning labs?
Yes, indeed. Yes, unfortunately, we have limited capacity for the literacy department to be able to serve every school in literacy labs. But do you guys want to talk about what you are doing, what you'd like to do beyond
Yeah.
the intensive school?
So I'll talk a little bit about what happened this year. So at middle school, we have 8 schools that have been identified as intensive support, yet all 12 middle schools really wanted to attend the professional learning and wanted to have that kind of consistency across. And so we did our best to make space for them and have them support that with funds as well. We were not able to provide the same level of support for learning labs, but the structures and pieces of it we have done. At the elementary level, we have similar needs where some schools wanted to have the access to the professional learning. And so we were able to, I would say, do some pieces of that this year. We were looking into next year trying to replicate that across all of the elementary schools. But with a very small literacy staff, we're just not sure exactly yet how much we are going to be able to replicate. What we hope to do, and I think this is an important piece, as instructional coaches, we hope to maximize the use of instructional coaches and having them understand the structure so that they could take it back to their schools. And like Kristen said, they're replicating this in other areas. So that's the goal, that this becomes the norm and that we help build the capacity of the schools to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our presenters? Well, thank you all. I know I learned quite a bit here tonight about Learning Labs, and I look forward to thinking about it some more and having some more questions for you all.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Very much appreciate what you're doing. Can we give them a round of applause?
Okay, we're going to do the next item on the agenda. And the next item on the agenda, thanks again, Jen, for that report. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, so we'll do that. So I'm going to move that the Board of Education adopt and approve all the motions set forth in Section C of the electronic agenda prepared for the March 27, 2017 regular school board meeting, exactly as said motions are written. Now, by voting affirmatively on this motion, a board member expresses his or her affirmative vote on each of the motions consolidated hereby, subject to any express separations that have been made by any member of the school board. Need a second? Second. Thanks. It's been moved in second. So are there any separations? Okay.
6.8.
6.8. Any others? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the items included in the consent agenda other than 6.8, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, motion carries 7-0. Okay, 6.8 is the Together Group Workshops. Ms. Moffitt.
Yeah, I wanted to pull this for some discussion around it and just some concerns that I have about the group providing the services, as well as the process in which, whether we were looking at multiple providers or we're only looking at this organization. So I guess those are my major concerns.
So let me just say a little bit about this item. We've been working with this group for a few years now on on professional. It's kind of like a workshop for leaders to work on their organizational skills. We had our entire central office team get trained with them on organizational skills, I don't know, a few years ago, I was part of that training. And it was so effective. So many of us got so much out of it. This is about how best to use your time, how to structure your calendar, how to take care of your short-term and long-term to-do lists. Right? Just how do you structure your time so that you're using every minute to its highest and best use? Because it was so effective and had such a positive impact on our team, we expanded the opportunity since then on an annual basis to new leaders, new central office leaders, new principals, as a kind of a one-time opportunity to think about how they keep themselves organized. So that's the purpose of the professional development and what we've been doing with it. The only reason that this is on consent is because it's for a slightly larger amount than usual, because there's been a request to get all of the school secretaries trained using this organizational approach, because school secretaries and their administrators work in close partnership on calendars and keeping them organized. So we wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page. It is optional, no one has to do it, it's not a requirement. But it's just been a very positive opportunity for our managers to manage their time well. The reason it didn't go out for bid, at this point, is just because we've been working with the vendor for several years, and we're just adding some people on. So that's the reason.
Okay.
I would assume.
Do we have a process by which vendors are designated sole source?
We do. We do have a process, yeah.
And is there associated paperwork and things like that? I mean, many governmental organizations require verification of sole source and do that. Do we do that, or is? I don't know if we do it.
Yeah, I'm not in all the day-to-day on that. Mike, can you speak to how the sole source procurement process works and how sole source plays into it? Would you mind? Or Kelly? Yeah, can you just come up for a second?
I mean, that's kind of a larger question, but
yeah, it's a larger yeah. We certainly do, though.
You can bring the whole family, Mike.
So we have rules and procedures around bidding and vendor selection, and we have a waiver process that is used on those occasions where we think an outright competitive bid is not the appropriate process for awarding the work. Often, a sole source is a rationale for a waiver. In this case, it's hard to argue that there's only one person in the whole world who could deliver the same service, and that's not what we're arguing. It's not the argument. This was based on continuation, which is really just sort of a rational business argument, that if you've trained a number of people in a certain methodology, you might as well continue. It's kind of a continuation argument.
We wouldn't do it otherwise.
Okay, so there is a process.
Very much, yeah.
And I just, it doesn't come before us that often, so it's just, you approve it.
Yes.
So you have to sign off.
I approve waivers from competitive bid
That's good
requirements.
To know. That's good to know.
Thanks, Mike.
And mostly I don't approve those as well.
That's also good to know.
That's right.
I guess I share some concerns about not particularly this training, but this organization and their associations, and that by bringing these people into our district, we're affirming the legitimacy of things like Relay Graduate School, which is destroying teacher education in our nation right now, and TFA, which has done great damage to the teaching profession in our nation right now. And that by bringing these people whose credentials are based on their work with those organizations into our district, we are affirming the legitimacy of these approaches and these organizations. And so I'll be voting against it for those reasons.
Okay, anyone else? Anna?
Yeah, I would also just share that I feel like some of my concerns are around, I understand, this is
probably high-quality professional development, but I do believe that we have organizations and businesses that could provide comparable services, and I just worry sometimes when we're not tapping our own community for the resources it has and we're looking outside of it to do this work. I would just like to see us also be looking within our community, particularly around some of this consulting work. I also do share TJ's concerns around the organizational affiliation of the person who does this. I know there's no direct working with students, but you know, she was involved with a charter school chain where there were some pretty egregious things taking place. So I also won't be voting for it.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, then I move that the Board of Education approve an expenditure to the Together Group in the amount of $14,550, which, when added to the previously contracted amount of $8,000, results in a total of $22,550 to be paid to the Together Group during the 2017 fiscal year to assist principals, assistant principals, central office leaders, and school-based administrative support in developing critical project and time management skills with funding from the 2016-17 Professional Learning and Leadership Development Budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any final questions or comments? Mayor, your advisory vote, please. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries.
No. I mean, opposition.
Pardon?
Opposition, yes.
Okay, yeah, two, right?
Right,
Okay,
right.
Motion carries 5-2. Okay, that concludes our, all items under the consent agenda for tonight. I would like to make a motion at this point because we do have a fairly large group of people in the audience wanting to discuss the Badger Rock Middle School charter contract, and it's way down on the agenda. So I'd like to move that we consider moving the Badger Rock Middle School charter contract discussion up to this point in the meeting and have that discussion right now. So I move that we rearrange the agenda to satisfy that objective.
Second.
Any questions, opposition? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Then, under other business, this item, then I will, for the point of discussion, I'll move that the Board of Education approve a charter school contract between the Madison Metropolitan School District and Badger Rock Middle School for the period of July 1st, 2017 through June 30, 2020.
Second.
Been moved and second. Discussion, questions? Mr. Members.
I understand that this contract is going to be approved tonight, but I have real concerns about the lack of clear standards in this contract and how that by the lack of clear standards, both academic progress standards and financial standards in the contract, that we are actually in violation of state law, which requires us to have clear standards. And secondarily, the references to the standards that I don't believe are clear, which are the SIP processes and SIP measures, I think are absolutely inappropriate standards for a small school with a varying recruitment. Because the SIP standards are based on the MAP scores of 3 classes. And when you have a larger school and you have a normal feeder pattern, essentially the 6th grade class is probably demographically in other ways not that much different than the 8th grade class that leaves. But with Badger Rock, you have varying sizes and characteristics of ingoing and outgoing classes, which can have a great impact on the SIP measure of three grades worth of MAP scores. This impact can create a false sense of progress. It can also create a false sense of having not met your goals. It cuts both ways. It's just when you know, with a small school, 5 kids different makes a huge difference. And you're recruiting each year kind of a different, you know, you get what you get. There is a certain, you know, this problem exists at all our schools with the SIP measures, but there's a certain stability when you have a set feeder pattern. And you have a larger school, things even out. So there's kind of 2 issues here. Number one is that there is a lack of clarity here, and again, the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, whose guidelines, whose standards and practice, whose principles and standards we are by law required to follow, call for us to have clearly articulated performance standards for the schools in our contracts. We don't have it here. We have a reference to a form and a reference to a SIP process. That's not clear articulation. And number 2 is, if the SIP process were actually, the SIP measures were actually spelled out within the contract, I don't think they'd be appropriate. I don't think they'd be useful. And what I'm looking at is 2 years from now, we'll have 2 years worth of SIP data, and we will have before us a renewal, because this is a 3-year renewal. And we're going to look at that, and maybe this is going to tell us the quality of the work that's going on there, or maybe it's not. And I would like to, at this point, with Badger Rock, be at a place where we can say, look, these are our expectations, and they come back and say, well, you know, we like this, we don't like that, but tonight, we're at a place where we have a mutual understanding of what the expectations are. Instead, we have sometime in the next 2 years, we're going to create SIPs, and those are going to be what the expectations are. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think it meets the law, and I don't think it's good practice. I understand that it's a little late in the game to do this, which is one of the reasons why I asked for a draft copy of the contract last week, and was maybe 2 weeks ago, and was told that it wasn't available. I would have brought it up then had I had a chance to read it. This is also the first time we have ever seen a charter contract before us without clear performance measures in it. Every other one we've seen before. So my expectation was that they'd be there. Not necessarily goals, but at least the measures were spelled out. And the goals is a new requirement that came with recent legislation in 2015. So that's where I'm at. We're in a quandary because we have to have a contract set, and we can't negotiate from the table here. I get that. But I also don't feel comfortable voting in favor of a contract that I think violates state law.
Okay, Ms. Pauley, we have a few questions on the table, and maybe you could help us clear some of this up.
Well, not sure if there are any questions or more statements, but you know, what we've done in this contract is expressly tied it to the goal-setting process each one of our other schools goes through on an annual basis, not on an annual basis, so that we're looking at those measures. That's an iterative process. It's an annual process with the administration, where they're setting goals that are numerical goals that are mutually agreed to. I would agree with TJ. It's not within the contract where it says we will, African American students meeting their growth target on MAP will be 67%. But it is embedded then within the SIP process, which does create an annual goal that you either meet or not meet. And then there are a litany of explanations as to why you may exceed it or not exceed it. And so the way we tried to do it is through an express link to the SIP process, and then an express tie, which is only one sentence, but it is a tie to the renewal process. And as we discussed earlier, there is certainly not a causal sentence in the contract that says if you do not meet your SIP goals, you will not be renewed, or if you do not meet your SIP goals, do not bother asking for a renewal because it's a foregone conclusion. But I think it is certainly linked that meeting the SIP goals will be one of the considerations for renewal. And so it is not causal, but it's linked. With respect to the financial, I understand TJ's point, but what we've done there also is, so we have some pretty tight processes that we do not grant our charter schools a ton of autonomy from. It's not that we're like, here are a couple of bucks, go fundraise and let us know in 5 years how you've spent the money. We have a pretty detailed workbook process that looks at staffing, that looks at expenditures, and so that we are delegating the money, we're looking at it every step of the way, and so again, it's linking to the processes of accountability we already have, and so I do think it meets those standards, but certainly I'm not, TJ is free for his interpretation also, but that's where I think we are, that I do think we're meeting the standards through identifying and linking through processes that already exist, that are already being used, have been used for the 6 years that the school has been in existence. So both parties have said those would be the ones we continue to use for the next 3 years.
Okay, before we bounce back to TJ, do anyone else want to weigh in here? Okay.
Go ahead. I want to say something, but not ready yet.
Okay,
I think TJ brings up a good point. I will rely, Dylan, that you have reviewed this against the laws, and that as how the accountability and the goals as set through the SIPs each year qualify with what is necessary under state law. Are you certain of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, as certain as the National Authorizer of Charter Schools guidance is new. I've looked at other contracts in the state. DPI would certainly, if they review it, if they kick it back, we've amended, the Badger Rock one had 7 amendments for various reasons, buildings and some of them. I would feel less comfortable if the SIP goals were not a goal set, if SIP was not a goal setting method with true goals of movement, I would feel less comfortable. But given the process by which we analyze data, we work to set movement goals of increase of 5%, increase of 10%. Those are true numerical goals. I think there's certainly some room in the SIP process if we want to introduce less flexibility, because to a sustained focus throughout the SIP process year over year. But given our SIP process, I feel comfortable.
Okay, so then I'm making that assumption based on your professional judgment and knowing the law. So making that assumption, I think we are doing a disservice to the school by not laying out more specific goals at the start, because we will be back here 2.5 years from now. We weren't satisfied as a board with the meeting of student needs and the academic performance data, but felt that there was really compelling reasons as to why the school wasn't meeting the expectations, and I felt very positive about the leadership and the plans for addressing the issues and moving forward. But turnaround in schools, or at least modifying, doesn't come easy. It doesn't come quickly. And I think it's important to have that vision of what the expectations are so that no one is surprised 2.5 years from now. The second point on this is that it pretty much takes it entirely out of the board's hands. So we're the ones who need to make the decision as to whether the school continues on, and yet we're not part of setting those expectations of what academic standards or other standards are. And I think that's where the contract would come in. And I can't imagine that if we apply this to every charter school, to just say, well, each year, we'll sort of see how you're feeling about that year and what you think is possible, and then be satisfied with that. So I share some of TJ's concerns, although not the legal concerns at all, but I share the more operational concerns, and I would be, if there's other board members who share the same concerns, I would be interested in knowing whether there is a need to vote on this tonight, or whether, in fact, this, so is there a timing issue with needing to approve this tonight?
The timing issue is our own policy. We get to this point every March where our policy says that we will approve the contract by April 1st. So it is policy 10,000. April 1st is not DPI's drop dead date to get the contract to them. And so, yeah, I mean, it's policy imposed, which is more waivable than a DPI. My practice is, and has always been, when it is approved, I send it to DPI. DPI uses a rubric and does provide us feedback. I've given the changes, been in consultation with DPI about various changes. This, to TJ's point, the biggest change in this one is that renewal, right? The renewal where we had said you need to focus on literacy, you need to do that. Those paragraphs have been removed, but there was no portion of our previous contract is the word I'm looking for, that was flagged by DPI as unacceptable under those standards for either right for the 1 year or for Badger last year.
Can I make a comment, James? Thanks, Dylan. I think that, I mean, if we were to apply the SIP goal-setting methodology, which is what schools generally use to guide their annual goal setting, it would be fairly easy to do, just to map that out for the remainder of the contract time. I think the process to determine what those particular goals might be ought to be fairly straightforward, assuming, Badger Rock would agree. And I would just remind the board that the SIP goal-setting process and methodology is not just based on MAP in literacy and mathematics. There are required goals for access to world language and the arts. There are required goals for school climate. It's a more well-rounded set of goals than I think we sometimes recall. So just keep that in mind too. But I would imagine that just extending the goal-setting methodology beyond the 1 year point, it would produce a fairly reasonable way of setting some goals. It, of course, can be revisited in the future.
I mean, I think some of the pivotal language, if that is the direction we move, which I will take the direction from the board, is if this, then this. And I would still argue against a pure causal that if this goal is not met, we will not renew. And so I would argue against that, both given our history as authorizers, but this would be our first one where those percentage marks are met. I agree with CJ, there was more in the last one, but they still weren't, attendance was the only one, and it was very close to begin with. And so I just caution that I think that is some of the concern about using the contract as you need to move from 77% to 78% to 79%, is that causal relationship. I still think 3 years from now, the board would want that as a piece of information to make their decision versus the decision being foreclosed by the contract.
Okay, Dean is up next.
All right, the frustrating thing for me and probably others is that a year ago, when we had this similar discussion, we realized that our charters were kind of left adrift for a while. And that I don't think we had a good enough understanding of how to run an instrumentality charter school as we do now. So I think we're making progress on this, but we're still, I don't think we're right yet. So I want to see Badger continue, and then, of course, our new one coming in, we have restrictions on that to start up, so I think we're in the process of getting that one right. But we let them drift a little bit, and I think that's the way we're in, to the point where one of them wasn't, you know, we stopped that one and changed it into a magnet school now. So it's we have to be more mindful of what charters are, and if we're going to run them, they're here, we got to run them, and they need some more than what they got. And I think we're doing that now, but it's still not where it's supposed to be. So the two specific questions, Dylan, maybe you can help. The areas that may be deficient, as TJ pointed out, if the DPI says, you know what, that's not good enough either, what then we have to come back and amend the contract, right? So they then negate that contract, we have to do it again? Or can we amend that portion of it that they say this isn't good enough? Or, so that part of it, and then even if they say, yeah, it's okay, but given the concerns here, can we continue to work on those and amend those a year from now or something where we can get more specific?
So as with any contract, we can amend it and attach amendments, and we did that multiple times in the initial one, like I said, around naming the facility, right, because we had named the facility to detail and all of that. So we can amend it. Historically speaking, if DPI has had comments on our contracts, there was a shift in Nuestra Mundos too, kind of as the law changed. Both parties came back to the table. We used the feedback from DPI and used that as the basis to come to a common understanding. As I said, this contract is substantially similar to the one we submitted to DPI just a year ago using the new standards, and I did not get that feedback from DPI. But people change at DPI, their lenses change. So even person to person reviewing it in the charter office, I'm always open to feedback from them. But yes, as with any contract, if both parties mutually agree, kind of like you can consent your way into almost anything, you can amend your way into almost anything as long as the parties mutually agree to it. We couldn't unilaterally impose it once it's a contract, though.
Okay, I'm going to I'd like everyone on the board to have a comment before we go back and take final comments. So we'll go, Michael, Ed, and I have a comment.
So just 2 points of clarification. So we approve, we do not state anything within the contract about the SIP. Administration follows the SIP as benchmarks that Badger Rock has to meet. Then you'll come back at the end of the contract, you'll come back to the board and either recommend or approve or recommend any changes or anything that comes up. Then it's brought to the board and then the board makes a decision then. Or we state that the SIP is the benchmark that by what we're going to measure Badger Rock's progress, and at the end of their contract, if they pass everything, then essentially it's an approval or change of decision to the board. Is that correct?
I think close. So the contract is not silent on the SIP right now. The contract expressly incorporates the SIP into it and added language to say progress towards academic goals set forth therein being in the SIP, shall be considered as part of any future renewal process. And the contract also in two sections, in 5 and 6 and 7, sets forth the plan for progressing students and making progress, and then kind of the alternative assessments in addition to standardized assessments that the school is committing to use to demonstrate student progress. I think, but what it doesn't say is that there is a goal of moving from 50% proficiency to 75% proficiency, either whole school or for a specific subgroup over the course of 3 years. So it doesn't set a numerical goal within the current draft. It references the SIP and the SIP process as the means by which annually numerical goals will be set, both around student performance through MAP data, and then through school climate, family family engagement, and then the other tabs of the SIP tool. So it's not silent, it just.
So my concern is my concern is that we do a disservice in shifting the carrot, essentially. I believe if there is forward progress, if they are doing the work that they aim to do, that is a positive, and then the work of administration and the work of the board is to reassess that ongoing work, not just at the end of 3 years, but I mean the feedback that we receive, and if they need extra support. I just don't want somebody to bring up that these measurements didn't work this year, but they'll work next year, or they're not working by this other measurements. So
Right, the contract doesn't exist in a vacuum. It does set forth a list of assessments by which the school has committed to use to demonstrate success, but it has not necessarily defined that success.
Nor are those demonstrable progress on those assessments has been X'd out of this current contract. It existed in the previous contract. So those are just assessments the school is going to give, not assessments that have anything to do with any renewal as the contract is before us. It's crossed out, Dylan.
Well, right, but they're also set forth in a section that says the method by which pupil progress in attaining educational goals under section 118.01 will be measured, right? So, I mean,
Okay.
would it satisfy you to add that back into the renewal? Because that.
Be better.
Done and done.
Michael, you?
So that's just my concern. I think if we have a clear plan as an administration on how we can set up Badger Rock for success without shifting the carrot, without shifting the parameters that they're being measured by, then that's the correct way. I understand how the students change from year to year, but that happens in big schools and little schools and all over. We have issues in measuring and what we measure, how we measure our students. So again, this goes back to that I feel that our charters get undue negative criticism for something that we do not really have throughout, and not just Madison School Districts. I'm just saying the entire state, the entire country as itself, what we are measuring and what is their success. So that's all.
Okay. I want Ed. I have a comment, and then Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, thank you. I understand the concern about identifying what renewal criteria would be. I don't know how you would establish that. I wouldn't feel comfortable at this point saying, here's what Badger Rock needs to show in order to be entitled to a renewal after 3 years, because you would have to identify some kind of objective criteria. And for some of the reasons that TJ identified, it's hard to say what would be fair to Badger Rock or to the school district at this point in terms of identifying those things. And I think the way it's set up now maintains the flexibility of the board to make a decision at the end of 3 years whether the school is making the kind of progress that people expect. And that's not going to be in a vacuum. I mean, that's not something that's going to come up for the first time after 3 years. I would think after every year, people would look at what how the school did, how it matched up with its SIP goals, and would be able to say, yeah, it looks like they're doing well, or if they're not, say, Hong, if you guys don't improve on this, it's not going to get approved again. So I think it will be an ongoing conversation. And one of the assets will be, I hope, this new position in the budget where there's someone whose job it will be to track the progress in our charter schools and make sure that the board is kept apprised of how the charters are doing, and the board that will be in place at that time will have the information it needs to make that kind of determination without we tying their hands at this point saying, here are some criteria that we think may be appropriate 3 years from now, but who knows?
All right.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. My comment is more on process and timing. It's one of the points that I continue to raise with the board and administration, that, for example, TJ mentioned that he asked for contract information 2 weeks ago. Okay, again, my point is about timing and process, because I want to continue to reiterate that it'd be great if we can have these conversations prior to the full board meeting, because a lot of times what we're talking about takes time to absorb, takes time to really comprehend and to have in-depth discussions about. So we really need to have all the information out there, and to make sure that we have these conversations prior to the full board meeting, so that we all would have had the opportunity to think about it and to make comments before we get to this point. And so I just want to continue to reiterate timing and process to make sure that as we move forward here, that we do the best job that we can, get the information out there in a timely manner so board members can make their comments prior to coming to the board, so that all other board members will have a chance to think about what those comments are prior to the board, prior to the full board meeting. So, Jen, I think you want to say something, or did one of you want to say something? And then at this point, I'd like to take final comments here, because this is one of the issues we face at the full board meeting. We can go for several hours on this topic, and so we're going to have to make a decision here. So is there some comments you'd like to make prior to
I want to make one comment, and Dylan, I think, wants to try a solution. So my comment is that I understand and respect the negotiating team's decision to include the SIP language, meaning goal setting per the SIP goal setting process annually, for all kinds of reasons. You guys already mentioned some of them. There's also the opportunity through the SIP goal setting process, as it already exists, to add additional unique goals for your school. So I very much want to just support the staff and the members of the Badger Rock team that made that decision. And of course, I respect the board's desire to have something more specific. The other reason it's important is that the goal-setting methodology does get tweaked. For example, the NWEA company that owns the MAP assessment will recut the cut scores, right, or how the growth targets are set. And that means we reset the goal-setting methodology for the schools, which would potentially make Badger Rock's measurable goals in the contract obsolete, right, and inappropriate a year from now, or less than that for that matter. As a board, you will, if everything goes as planned, reconsider the goal-setting methodology for the entire district through the revision of the strategic framework next year. So I only say that because I think the team's intent in writing SIP goals as sort of a general statement was to allow for that flexibility, not to limit your visibility into the annual goal setting, the progress of the school. So there are pros and cons of making this goal really specific and measurable at this time. So I just put that out there for your consideration. I think there was rationale, and good solid rationale for doing so.
I'll just leave it with I accept the comments and the feedback on the timeliness. I tried to just track our process that we've used for these contracts in the past, and if we'll improve it in years to come. So I accept that feedback and thank you. I'm just wondering if so 2 of the sections that were stricken from the renewal process was that, so the language, and I'm looking at pages 17 and 18 if you're following along on Google Docs. 27.03 says such renewal application shall be in the form and format required by the district. And I struck through and shall minimally include the following. And I think to TJ's point, those were the parts that were cut. Sub C of that was demonstrable progress towards meeting, and in that it was only the 15-16 SIP goals, because it was a 1-year contract with particular focus on improved reading growth and proficiency, especially for African American students. And sub D was then as TJ pointed out, the reference to the assessments as set forth in 5.02, which were negotiated to demonstrate student academic proficiency. And I'm just floating it out there that I don't know if the adding back meets the concerns to add back the SIP goals for 27-18 through the 2019 school year with a particular focus. As Mr. Tran said, they're doubling down on literacy and continuing to make literacy the focus. And if that is not acceptable, because I realize that's a negotiated change, we'd bring it back in April, but it would, if that is acceptable, avoid the need to re-calendar it. Like I said, that might not be the solution you're looking for, but I do agree that setting that percentile is difficult just where we are. And so I'll float it out there.
Okay, final comments from the board. Mr. Mertz.
I'm going to try and be quick in all these, and some of them are ones that Dylan and perhaps others will want to respond to. I think that, as Dean said and Dylan noted, that there is a learning process around this. I also think that we need to, that in this process we need to recognize that charters are a different animal, and that in terms of, this is a contracted, there's a basis. They're called charters for something because they have a charter, and a charter is a form of a contract, and so that they, it's a different animal. I think that the National Association of Charter School Authorizers certainly recommends, and it's hard to say whether they require, the kind of causal relationship between setting actual numeric goals. And from policy perspective, I don't like that. I don't think it's a good idea. I do think setting goals and having demonstrable progress towards goals is a good idea, and I think that these should be SMART goals. And at the time we passed the parts of the contract that are crossed out here, referencing the 2015-16 SIP, that SIP had been written. And the contract we have now currently references SIPs that have yet to be written. The current SIP for Badger Rock calls for a 40% increase in reading proficiency in African American students, which seems to me to be a pretty silly goal. One that is not attainable in 1 year's time, and based on their fall and winter MAP scores, it's not going to be attained. And so I don't have a whole lot of confidence in the SIP process if that's what it results in for setting goals that I think are going to be useful goals. But demonstrable progress, I think, is a compromise, is a general field that we can talk about. I mentioned the financial pieces. I will tell you that one of the things that worries me about the financial pieces is that the memo we received in December said that in order for the school to be financially feasible, it requires 150 students. We have here a contract for a school for 120 students. Therefore, by definition, by our own measure, it's not financially feasible. Again, the National Association of Charter School Authorizers requires that contracts be financially viable. Viable and feasible are not that different. I didn't write the memo that said it's not financially feasible. And so I've got concerns around that too. I also have concerns around the one place where I actually see a requirement here is that the school will be 120 students at the start of the 19-20 school year, is it?
Final school year, yes.
If they're not, what happens? I mean, that's that. That's, it's. I guess again, I'm looking for clarity here.
Mary.
I think TJ brings up a lot of good points. What I really liked was where you say demonstrable progress. The way I would suggest we approach this is to identify the issues in which we had concerns when this came up. To set, perhaps, the longer-term vision or what we think would be where the school should be. Not the ideal, because we feel every student should be proficient or advanced, right? But at least that would be aligned with what our expectations are. And whether that's with enrollment. See, I think 120 students would be demonstrable progress towards being sustainable. Is all of this going to happen in 2.5 years? No. But let's set out what our expectations are and then put that we do, and clearly, and whether it's around enrollment, whether it's around reading scores, whether it's around culture and climate or retention of students from year to year, whatever it is. But I think these were the same issues. We're not making up new issues. I think these are the same issues that when it came to us, we had concerns about. And that's why I think it's actually only fair to the leadership at the school and of the families there that we set out what those expectations are and then say, I like the term demonstrable progress. So yes, there's still wiggle room, but there's still setting that out. That's how I think is a reasonable way of approaching it.
Okay, so I guess where we are is, can you make those changes? I'm not sure we can make those changes tonight. And so the question is, when do you see us moving forward here? On a personal level, I'm not as concerned around the SIP approach as others. I'm not that as concerned. I mean, we have talked about these goals and objectives for a while, and I guess the issue here is around clarity, that some board members feel that the contract is not clear on some of these objectives that we have spoken about for a while. But I'm willing to move forward in the belief that that the administration and we will, in fact, hold Badger Rock and ourselves accountable to obtaining the goals that we have been speaking about here. So, but that's my view, and so the question for you all is, what's your recommendation here to hearing what board members have to talk about for moving forward here in the time frame?
I have one more concern, James, that we need to speak about. Our expectations here today are going to change a month from now, because there's two of us that are leaving this seat. So you're shifting the expectations completely in us not making the decision tonight. I do not know where the other future board members stand, but they could totally push this away or forward, drastic, or we don't know. So that is a big concern. Badger Rock, we supported Badger Rock. We got to this point. I'm to this point with Badger Rock, and I think we're being unjust to them. We're being unjust to our own decisions that we made as board members, which, okay, fine, that is, but to the students and to the staff, that could drastically change next month.
That's a good point. Mr. Loomis.
I kind of have similar thoughts to what Michael was saying, and even though we've really discussed some problems that we're seeing and some issues, we should also have to say that from last year to now, the leadership over there has shown to be strong and making some progress, and we should acknowledge that, and good job. So from that perspective, I think that with more assistance and oversight, I think we'll move not just Badger, but our other charters in the area where they need to be. I don't think, we're going to have problems with all the other two also until we get this really better understood. So I'm willing to go with this right now and work on the issues that we've identified.
Okay, Anna, and then TJ, then I'm gonna call a question.
So I haven't added too much. I know I had discussed at my briefing whether I could participate in this discussion. Is that fine?
Yes, other people talk about schools.
Okay.
That's good.
And I just have my son enrolled there. So I would feel better about the contract if the language that was removed around the growth that TJ referenced was put back in there. I would feel better about the contract if we're not going to be, or I would be supportive of delaying it so that we could set clearer parameters within the contract. So
The growth language.
Yeah, which, I just want to hear, I guess, TJ's last comment, and then I'll kind of comment on it all.
I guess one of the options that I understand Michael's concerns, and I think that they're legitimate concerns, and as Mary referenced, that these are issues that the people, the seven of us at the table have, these aren't new to us, this has been a couple of years process, and the continuity, I think, is important, and both for us and the school. I also want to acknowledge Dean's comment that my concerns that I'm raising tonight are nothing to do with the school, but rather about the contract, and about the relationship that the contract reveals, and I want to be very clear about that's where what my concerns are about. And then I want to suggest, looking at the instruction work group agenda for April 17th, it is not a very heavy agenda, and I believe that we could do a special meeting April 17th. Michael and Ed would still be board members at that time. And I think that would give our team and the Badger Rock team a chance to absorb and incorporate things they've heard tonight, negotiate, because a contract is a negotiated matter, bring us something on the 17th, and we could go from there. And so that would be my suggestion, and I will make a motion if necessary.
Well, Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, I don't think we need a special meeting. Why don't we just say for 2703, which is that such renewal application shall be in the form and format required by the district and shall minimally include evidence of demonstrable student progress on assessment set forth in paragraph 5.02 above. Doesn't that address the issue?
Ms. Pauley, did you capture that?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the second part of the language, and I think, to TJ's point, it's a negotiation, and so the other party hasn't agreed. I also, having negotiated with them, don't anticipate them disagreeing to putting that language back in. But I think we could add to that amendment to direct legal counsel to negotiate that and inform the board by no later than Friday, March 30th, whether successful negotiations, in which case right, I mean, I'm just
well, we can amend it
Yeah.
and say that's the form we want it in, and if they agree
Yeah.
to it, then it's done. It doesn't have to come back to us.
Right.
You don't have to notify us unless there's a problem.
Unless it's not done. I was going to say direct legal counsel to inform if it could not be resolved. But, right, I mean, we're, yeah. I'm just gonna
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that, so we need to, well, we have,
Yeah, the main motion is
the
on the
main
floor.
motion's on the
So-
floor, so we have to,
Can I move to an amendment?
yes.
I move that we amend the proposed contract. I just missed one. Amend section 27.03 of the proposed contract to state, such renewal application shall be in the form and format required by the district and shall minimally include evidence of demonstrable student progress on assessments set forth in paragraph 5.02 above.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second.
So voting on the amendment now.
So we're voting on the amendment. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the amendment to the main motion? Mayor, advisory vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the amendment carries 7-0. Okay, so back to the main motion, which has been amended. And that's been moved and seconded. So, Mayor, your advisory vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 6-0. 6-1. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can find our way back to the.
I think it's instructional work group. Am I right about that?
As soon as I get myself back there. Okay. All
All
right.
right,
Everyone
now-
take a deep breath, and we are at the item of instruction work group, and Mr. Mertz.
All right, and if I can remember what happened in the beginning of the month, we'll be in good shape. We actually had two very important topics on the agenda before the instructional work group, and some relatively important information about both of them. The main topic was an update on both the current work going on with personal pathways as well as the plan going forward. I think the most significant pieces of that is that the planning for the cohorts that enter in September is very, very much in progress and going forward very well by all accounts. And the other is that we will be continuing the following year with a second cohort in the health sciences, but the decisions around what the second pathway will be put off to a year beyond, and that also gives me an opportunity to let people know that there is a survey that I'm not sure when it closes, but it's out give people an opportunity to weigh in on especially the second pathway and pathways in general. From what I've heard, I have not looked at the full survey yet, but I think that that's something that is important. Comments, questions, or anything that I missed that's absolutely essential around the pathways update?
Only that the survey is on pathways in general.
Pathways?
In general.
In general,
Yeah.
in general. All right, and the other is middle school start times. And the work goes forward on that also, due to the hard work of Karen Kepler and our staff. There's an alternate plan before that is in progress that may go forward that calls for a less expensive but slightly different way to move middle school start times forward. And the one huge change is that the school day goes till after 4 p.m., which, because that is a significant change, it prompts that a second survey will be done to determine what the impacts on our families will be of a more drastic change in our schedules. And that survey has not gone out yet, I don't believe. Has not gone out yet. But will. And so people interested in middle school start times, look for that. The date and topics for the next instruction work group are April 17th, and the topics are an update on alternatives, and by alternatives referring to the Capitol High related alternatives, not the special education related alternatives, a distinction that we continue to need to make, and an update and preparing for a renewal of our partnership, our multiple party partnership on behavioral health in the schools. That's the news from the instruction work group.
All right, thank you, Mr. Merckx. We'll keep on moving here, and the next item on the agenda is operations. Mr. Hughes.
Yes, thank you. We had a operations work group meeting on March 13th. Had a number of things on the agenda. The first and main topic was the budget development discussion regarding benefits and compensation. And we spoke about health insurance within the context of the governor's budget proposal requiring at least a 12% contribution to the cost of health insurance from all school employees. And we also talked in conjunction with that and also separately from that about a possibility of consolidating our health insurance options from 3 down to 1, and the cost savings that would be realized through that sort of move and where that money might be dedicated if the board were to go in that direction. That conversation will continue at our next meeting, which is on April 3rd, and I believe will be the principal topic of discussion then as well. We also talked about some proposed changes to board policies, which is an action item tonight. The first is board policy 9000A, which is the Code of Conduct, Ethics proposal, and we have some proposed changes in that policy pursuant to our regular cycle of review of school district policies. Dylan, do you want to say anything about that one?
I guess just my general comment is there are some changes from the work group to this. I've tried to be responsive to board feedback. I will say it's been a little tricky as we've not been totally aligned. And I really do just want to leave it with, while these are my recommended changes around language, of all of the policies you're asked to consider, these are the ones that most directly impact you. And so, you know, I welcome the discussions and the decisions and, you know, hope that we can get to a place where it's something a majority of you at least can live with. But really my goal in these was not to impose changes upon you, but try to capture the feedback I heard in a way that makes sense.
Okay, I bet I could, well, just for purposes of moving along the discussion, I will move that we approve the changes to board policy 9000A and 9000B as set forth in tonight's meeting material.
Before there's a second, Ed, just to make this simple, can you move that with the change that the definitions, that the one you pointed out, employees defined as citizen members, the parentheses should be except students of school board committees?
Oh, that one's still in there?
That's still in there.
Yeah, I missed that.
So just so that we don't have to go back and do another amendment around that. So if you can make the motion that way.
That's incorporated in the amendment, in the motion.
Second.
Okay.
And actually, this is something I personally would like to table. I think this is something that would be important for the new board members to be part of, because this will affect them and their board role. So I think this is something that I would like them to have the opportunity to give some feedback on the ethics that kind of govern the board. So I would like to table this till at least April, the April meeting.
I just assume I think your point's well taken, but I just assume we not table it because there's always a review cycle, and every new board will always have something imposed upon them from the last board, and they will have the opportunity in the normal review cycle to update and make changes. And so this policy also is not totally binding. It's more of a public-facing document, and so I just assume we move forward. But I think your point's well taken.
Okay, other discussion? TJ?
I think I may end up where Michael is now, but so hold that motion. You might get a second in a while. But let's see how we get there. On 9000A, I have significant problems with Section 5, I'm sorry, the section on conflict of interest, and section and number 1 and number 5 over those. I think that in general, what we're doing is imposing qualifications upon board members that are not statutory. The state statutes say who can be a board member, and what we're saying is that people who do these other things can't be board members. And we don't have the power to do that. It's not given to us. And further, that we are saying if you want to be a board member, that we have to give up these other rights that you have, such as, the right to sue. The right to issue formal complaints. So, go down to number 5. Furthermore, no member of the board shall take legal actions or initiate formal complaints that are adverse to the district. Well, if one of us agreed with Dave Blaska that this district was in violation of Act 10, I think that a board member should have the legal right to join that suit. And I certainly don't think that as a district we have the power to take away that right. So I'm really, I don't see how we can, number one, I don't think these are good ideas, but number 2 is I don't see how we can do it. I don't, these are basic things that I have the right to petition my government, I have the right to file lawsuits, I have the right to do these things. And to say that if I want to serve as a Board of Education member, I can't do those things? Now, clearly, if I were to sue the district, then as a board member, I would have to recuse myself from all board activities related to that suit. That's the conflict of interest. But the district telling me that I can't sue the district if I want to serve as a board member doesn't, we don't have the power to do that.
TJ, the next sentence says this limitation does not include individual actions commenced by a member of the Board of Education on his or her own behalf.
Of his or her child.
Or on
his
behalf
or
of his or her child.
All right, another example. If I wanted to file an OCR complaint, if I believed we were violating, if I believed we were violating the civil rights of students, staff, et cetera, that's not on my behalf. People file OCR complaints who are not on their own behalf.
Yeah, that's right. That's something you couldn't do under this policy.
Yeah, I think I should have the right to do that.
If you are a board member and you have problems with the way that the district is handling employees, then you work as a board member to change that. But to say that you are willing to be a board member and yet sue on behalf of employees of the school district sue the school district,
Thinking more in terms of students than
or
employees.
students, okay, fine. But yeah, I think that that is a reasonable restriction.
I don't.
Well,
I
I
will
understand that.
add to this also, what about open meetings violations? If I believe as a board member that there's open meetings violations, can I file a complaint?
I would argue that exception allows you to. Right, I mean, taxpayer standing, but as an individual, I think you would be able to under that exception. That was the intent of that.
And as I understand what I believe to be the reason to restrict board members from taking action adverse to the district is that it's an abuse of our power as board members, because you put whoever you're dealing with in the school district in an untenable situation. You know, if I were to represent a student in an expulsion proceeding, for example, you know, that inherently skews the process, because we're the people who hire the hearing examiners. You know, it's just an imbalance of power that I think is inappropriate at a lot of levels, but mostly because of the position it puts the employees of the district who have to deal with that. Yeah?
So my question would be then, if that situation came up, what discretion of the board would we have in punishing that action?
You know, I think that the board polices the board, so the board would be the ones who would have to say, we disapprove of that. Pass a resolution saying you disapprove of it, I guess.
It would be a public censure, essentially. It would be the
whatever,
equivalent to, yeah.
And can you describe what a public censure would entail?
It would be the board publicly passing a resolution saying, we think your conduct is in violation of our policies, and therefore we disagree or disavow the conduct as standing in conflict with the policies governing the board and the district.
So,
Michael? Did you have?
Well, I do share similar concerns with Michael around the fact that we're writing a policy. I know it'll be reviewed, but particularly in regard to number 5 under conflict of interest, by using that entire statement, I mean, that could really be interpreted as anybody who's working with students in any type of advocacy role, because there's always potential to be in an adverse position with the district. There could be that. And then many times, you know, I can think of people who work with students, and a lot of times it's kids that are marginalized that actually are working more closely with advocates. So I personally feel like that first sentence, which I had sent to the board earlier, is an overreach. I think if you want to draw a line, I could see where litigation would be a place to draw that line, but I don't think that we could dictate, and particularly not what people do in a voluntary role. I just don't see us having the capacity to put those parameters on people and what they're doing in their work.
And just in this discussion, I can see that there's more deep thought that needs to be brought to our ethics as board members, and not just for us currently, but future board members. I mean, imagine yourself in a role where you want to shed some light on a subject, but you're only the single vote against 6 votes in a polar opposite. And this is a distant example, but anyways, bottom line is I think we can we need to discuss it a little bit deeper, and I would like to give this opportunity to new board members, because I see good potential on those future board members and their input. And yeah, so I still say.
I have a question for Dylan.
Yeah, Michael, I don't believe board members should get to choose their rules and their guidelines. And if I'm not going to come on the board and then say, I want to change the rules. And these are just guidelines for conduct. Guidelines for conduct that ensures that we have public representatives operating within the district that are perceived by the community, students, our staff, the administration as being unbiased and as representing or having code of conduct that is befitting this office. I don't think that these are terribly high standards. I think if we want to find the examples that somehow someone's going to get tripped up on, sure. Otherwise, frankly, I think that they basically will have no teeth in them at all. And it is voluntary, right? The only thing that can happen is that you get censured by the board, but then that takes the majority of the board to do it anyway. So, Michael, I mean, frankly, I think we've drugged this thing through the mud for way too many meetings. I don't want to sit through another meeting discussing 9000 A or B one more time and wordsmithing it. TJ is saying the exact same thing that TJ said a month ago. So either we vote it up, vote it down, or just, skip it. I mean, this is, if we can't agree on the basics of the code of conduct, and I really think that, I'm tired of discussing this, and I really think that we should just decide, and it's for the board. Vote against it then, but let's vote it.
TJ?
I have a couple questions.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? You had said before that somehow this would prevent people from being able to serve on the board, and I didn't understand your point.
My point is that you have to give up rights in order to serve on the board, and that if you don't, and if you take an oath, and this speaks to one of Mary's things, is that about how seriously we take this. I take oaths very seriously, and we swear an oath to follow the policies of the board. My master's thesis was on oath-taking. I take oath-taking very seriously. So I think that you're right that there are no teeth, but as individuals, I think that there is something there that's there. But I didn't want to say the things I've said before. I wanted to ask a couple of questions of Dylan, actually, at this point. And about, on conflict of interest 1, the last clause, or would tend to influence his judgment or actions and performance of his or her duties. That is an or, not an and, which means that any employment that a Board of Education member, and this again goes to qualifications, any employment we take can't influence our judgment or performance of our duties, which is different than is incompatible with a proper discharge, which is a different sentence. It's an or there. Which means that, I teach. Teaching certainly influences my judgment and actions. So, I can't teach.
So we're
That's what
going
it
to
reads.
how I prefaced the entire discussion, which is my goal is not to impose rules on the board. That's not my goal. That's actually not my role in this particular policy. There are a lot of times where I'm like begging you to do something. This is not one of those times. This is language that has been in the policy that I have not, since we brought it up in November, gotten feedback on. I think that is one reading of that. And again, what I'm asking you to do is to consider how you want to police yourselves and what common expectations you want to set for yourselves. And I do view my role in this as Scrivener in many ways, not as advocate for any of this. And so again, that is not a section we have discussed, and we've discussed many of these ad nauseum. But that's certainly one fair interpretation.
And so I guess that I would recommend stopping that sentence after duties.
Which sentence is that, TJ?
On conflict of interest 1. Page 1, actually. Page 1, bottom of the page. Conflict of interest 1, no employee or member of the Board of Education may engage in other employment or independent contracting which is incompatible with the proper discharge of his or her district duties. And I would end that sentence there.
Do you want to make an amendment to
I will come back and do that in a second, or should I do that now?
Why
It
not?
does.
Let's do it now.
Then, well, there might be a second one, which is,
Unless they're incompatible, we can do them separately.
that's true, but Mary says we have been spending a hell of a lot of time on this, and I figured doing them
TJ,
together.
I'd support you on this one.
Okay, why don't we just do it? Okay, all right, so I move that on page 3 of the draft, under conflict of interest 1, the clause after the word duties be stricken.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, am I your advisory vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
All right, just a clarification on number 5. This limitation does not include individual actions commenced by a board member, so that would include class actions.
On his or her behalf, yes.
So board members could, and that's your understanding here.
If you are commencing an action or party to the commencement of an action on your behalf or on the behalf of your child, I believe that this sentence covers it.
No, but the question is that it says does not include individual actions. Does that mean it does include class actions on behalf of his or her
When I used the
child?
word individual, it was not to distinguish from class.
That's what
It
I was
that
asking.
You are a
That's what
person.
I was asking.
That was not the intent of
That's
the
what it was, a clarification question. Okay. I move that the word individual be stricken.
And why?
Because I think that, that board members should be able to take part in class actions. And that isn't clear here.
If you're not the attorney representing the class, you're part of the class, then you are suing in your own name. I mean, you are acting individually then.
You're the et al. Like-
So, but I just, the inclusion of the word individual here, you know, I'm not an attorney, but the inclusion of the word individual here seems to me that it might preclude class actions. If the two attorneys at the table tell me it does not, then I will leave that alone. But the minutes.
I believe that's what they're saying.
This is certainly not an anthill I'm willing to die on, so I will take the direction of the board one way or the other.
I think that's what the two attorneys are saying, but I also, if removing individual does not alter or cause any,
Limitation does not include
Let's-
actions
let's-
commenced by a board member on I think the on his or her behalf is the important prepositional phrase therein.
Right.
So I can,
The individual seems to me to be perhaps misleading and certainly,
ambiguous at best.
yeah, that's why I suggested striking it. If there's a second.
But there's no
But
second.
if there's not.
second. Third.
It's been moved and seconded. Am I your advisory vote? All in favor? Aye.
Nay.
Opposed? Passes 6-1. So it's perfect now, right?
Yep.
No.
Perfect document.
Beyond
No, but it's
reproach.
better.
Okay, Anna?
That we remove the language, "No member of the Board of Education, whether through an employment activity, a volunteer role, or other means, shall represent a district, student, or employee in any matter adverse to the district."
No, where is that one?
Number 5.
First sentence of number 5.
It's the first sentence
Okay.
for conflict of interest, number 5.
I would then strike furthermore.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the sentence.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Am I your advisory
Was there
vote?
a second to that?
I'll second.
So we're striking everything up to
Well-
furthermore?
That's the.
That's the
Through
motion.
furthermore.
Yeah,
Through
including
furthermore.
furthermore.
Am I your advisory vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Nay? Okay, that passes 5-1 to 1, is that right? Is that what it was?
I think it was
Maybe
6.
6 to 1 abstain.
No, I voted against it.
Oh, okay, yeah, so 5-1-1.
Okay, anything else? Dean?
One right underneath it, undue influence. I think those sentences are redundant. I'd move to strike the first one.
Undue influence.
It's right underneath number 5. I'd move to strike the first one and keep the second. First sentence, I mean. They seem redundant to me. The other one's more specific. It's right underneath number 5. It says undue influence number 1. I move to strike the first sentence and keep the second. The sentence I would keep would be, board members shall not use such positional authority to direct district staff to adopt the board member's position. And skip the, and strike the other one.
If you use the word such, don't you have to include
The previous.
The such is a reference to position as a board member.
Yeah, to the previous.
So it's just kind of wonky sentence structures.
Second one out.
Yeah, why don't you take the second sentence?
Yeah, you
Okay,
take the
all
second
right,
one
then
out.
I would take it back and remove the second and keep the first.
Okay, is there a
No, I
second?
would move that we keep, no member of the Board of Education shall use his or her position as a board member to exert undue influence upon district staff in any decisional processes, and then strike the rest of that.
So you are essentially moving to reject the proposed amendment to that section, right? Is that?
Yeah. No, you're right, Joe.
If that's.
The whole thing's new language.
We also need a
Well,
her
okay,
next to.
Sorry, what?
All right, it's been moved and seconded to
We need a
remove-
her next to his or her position. Missing in the
Yeah,
draft.
got
I'm
it.
sorry, I'm just.
Or use his or her, yeah,
Right.
it has to be
Yeah,
added.
Well, we're going to amend, we might as well clean that.
Or just put there.
chalk it up to Scrivener's error.
Is the motion clear? So that section will read, no member of the Board of Education shall use his or her position as a board member to exert undue influence upon district staff in any decisional processes. Correct? All right. Amaya, your advisory vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Okay, it passes 6-0 to 1. All right, any other amendments to that one? If not, let's move on, let's vote on the policy. Amaya, your advisory vote?
Your motion was for both policies, so we should
Okay.
probably see if anyone's got anything to say.
Well, I assume,
So it
I'm
was for
just-
A
I'm
and
just-
B, and B was struck.
What's that?
It was not for the substantive 1540, it was only for
No, it's just
9,000 A and B.
9,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you made the motion for 1540 also. I
Oh, no, no, I
I
did
misheard your
Nope,
motion.
I think you knew you were gonna.
I misheard your motion.
okay, just for 9,000. Amaya, your advisory vote? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
That passes
Abstain.
5 to 1 to 1. All right, next up is 1540.
Not good enough, darn it.
And I move that we adopt the proposed changes to Board Policy 1540 as set forth in our, the materials prepared for this evening's meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I also move to amend it such that the name of the policy is, what did I say it should be?
Board member expectations. I think.
Yes.
For board members.
Expectations for board members, rather than ethics. Rather, okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussions of that one? If not, Amaya, your advisory vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7,
Abstain.
6-0 to 1. All right, any other amendments? If not, let's vote on the policy. Amaya, your advisory vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
5, TJ, did we?
I voted yes.
Oh, okay, so it passes
I voted-
6-0 to 1, great. All right.
I'll take it.
Oh, we also have a magnet school policy to vote for.
We did.
Yes, we do.
I move that we adopt the proposed magnet school and/or programs policy number 10100 as prepared in the materials for this evening's meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, I'm up. TJ?
Yeah. I'd like to offer an amendment. I'd like to explain why, and then I'll offer the amendment. The preamble rationale for this policy has some statements that, A, I, as an individual board member, am not comfortable with, and B, as a board, I don't think we have discussed. And I don't think what we've, and the statements in particular are that the board recognizes that in order for the district to be a district of choice for all families that live within and outside the Madison Metropolitan School District, the district must offer a variety of high-quality, rigorous opportunities to meet the needs of all students and families. Magnet schools and programs within existing schools are one means of enhancing educational opportunities and opportunities within the district. To me, the idea that we need to be a district of choice for people outside Madison Metropolitan School District is not something that I think should be among our priorities. And secondly, I think that offering a variety of high-quality, rigorous education opportunities is not something, I mean, as a general statement, yes, I'm committed to that, but in this context, I think it commits us to the expansion of charters and magnets, and it certainly pushes us in that direction. And I think that's a discussion that we haven't had yet. So with that in mind, I offer an amendment to this to strike the language, to strike the language, I have to go back to it, I'm sorry, to strike the language starting with however, and replace it with however, the board also recognizes that our policy should define and address schools and programs that other than neighborhood schools and programming, specifically magnet schools and magnet programs. I think the reason we're passing this policy now is because we have two schools that don't fit the neighborhood school concept, and that we have a desire to bring them within our policy, to define what they are. And I think the other things are things that this board, or the board that is elected in April, may or may not want to do. And if after a thorough consideration of where we want to go with magnets, the board decides that the language or the ideas contained in that preamble are where the board is at, then I think we should go ahead and do that. But I think that it's premature to do it at this time. I think the rationale for this is clearly to bring things under our policy. So if there's a second for that motion.
So your motion is the language that you sent in your email earlier
Yeah,
today.
and I can read it from start to finish if you want. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Any discussion? Maya, your advisory vote? Abstain, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
Abstain.
Oh, 6-0, 601. Now we can move on, unless there are other amendments to the main motion. Amaya, your advisory vote on the policy itself? All in favor? Aye. That passes 7-0. And then do we have to do another motion to bring in Spring Harbor, or is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I move that the Board of Education formally recognize Spring Harbor Middle School as a magnet school pursuant to Board Policy 10100.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Am I advisory vote? Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes 7-0. And then we also talked about, at our meeting, an update on safe drinking water and the lead testing plan. And anyone looking for more information on that can find it on a page on the website, which can be found at buildings.madison.k12.wi.us voluntary-water-testing. And that's my report, and we have another meeting Monday, April 3rd, to talk about further budget development.
A quick comment. I think we should say it out loud that they're all being tested. If they're positive, they're immediately turned off and will be replaced. Am I right? Yeah.
Great,
So the
thank you,
problem
Dean.
has been mitigated.
I want to add that the communication I got as a parent was excellent. So.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Hughes. Another yeoman's job on the last day here, so we'll move on. So, next item on the agenda, other reports to the board. City of Madison Education Committee. Judge Koval and Leo did the reports on the municipal court truancy report. You have it in your packet. It basically went over the details of some of the numbers, the data, some of the demographic information around truancy in our schools. So I'll leave it at that unless there's questions, but it pretty much covered the demographics and where we are with our habitual truancy in schools. The youth transportation talked about basically the 1.5 mile, 2 mile route. Basically wanted to find out about, in essence, what students are being covered under our transportation policies and what students are not. And so that was the discussion around Metro Youth Transportation. Most of the discussions on the education committees thus far has been more informational, and I think maybe the positive thing that came out of this meeting was to talk about what actions the committee should start looking at and taking, instead of sitting and doing entirely informational conversations. What are we learning from this information, and what should this committee do to bring forth actions in the future? So I think that was probably the most positive thing to come out of the education committee, to look at what should we be taking actions on. So look forward to more recommendations around actions moving forward. So, any questions? Okay, then that concludes the City of Madison Education Committee report. And next on the agenda, Student Senate.
So we've had 2 meetings since our last board meeting, and we continued our discussion of pathways. Hopefully wrapping up, we're going to continue to work with Mr. Fralin. Aside from that, we're planning a small event for Teacher Appreciation Week that we'd like across the high schools. So we're just looking for volunteers and hoping to coordinate that effort.
Okay, thank you. Okay, MSCR report.
So the MSCR Advisory Committee met March 22nd. Big news, our MSCR Executive Director, Lucy Chafin, as you know, will announce her retirement to the board or to the committee, and stated her last day is June 23rd. There's work on finding a suitable replacement. And the committee recommended as the new director, they would like to, mingle with the director. So Lucy's kind of planning everything after her retirement to set a good path for the new director. So that's ongoing work, and we need somebody strong for MSCR to fill some big shoes. And thank you to Lucy Chafin for the work that she did over all these years. So we hope to get a quality candidate for this large entity in our school district. That's it.
All right, thank you, Michael. Education resource officers.
All right, we had another lively and productive discussion. We started off with reviewing our current ERO contract. Dylan walked us through some of the highlights of the contract, and then it was followed up with Captain Ackert and Tony Peterson coming to talk about best practices, procedures around calling police, and we intended to look at the 2015-16 annual ERO report, but there's a little bit of a glitch, so we didn't cover that as a group. I'm excited moving forward. We're in discussions of getting Jeanette Deloya to facilitate, so she'll be joining that group, which I think will be very helpful. Like I've said before, we have a great diverse group with a lot of different perspectives, and I think her facilitation skills will be helpful in guiding our discussion. And I would also just say in conclusion, in light of the event that went forward today, I think I will continue to encourage people, and if other board members could continue to encourage people and let them know that we do have the ERO ad hoc committee, particularly to address the issue around gathering public input, increasing transparency, and improving our policies. So I just would encourage people to attend our meetings. We always start with public comments because it's very difficult for us to respond to people's comments in the public if they're not coming and sharing them directly with Board of Education members. With that being said, our next meeting is April 19th at 5 p.m.
And Anna, question. Can you remind us lay people, civilians out there in the world, where to show up?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
If interested? Here, right here. Excellent. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna. Okay, next item on the agenda, cell phone tower easement, Memorial High School. I'll move that the Board of Education enter into an agreement to sell an exclusive easement to American Tower for $786,000. The MMSD Business Office and Legal Department were assisted by Boardman and Clark LLP during this transaction.
Second.
Been moved and second. Questions, comments?
I got a couple questions for whoever's the staff person on this, very short ones, probably close to yes or no. Very close to yes or no. But I just want to, and yeah, just real short. I'll let you get settled, and you're going to be right back up again because these are. Question number one is there any significant things that they can do in the easement that they can't currently do with the lease?
No.
Okay, so no. The main parts it's changed. And the second question is this for Mike, that this goes into Fund 10, and it's a one-time payment, and it will appear in Fund 10, and how we use it will be as we decide how we use everything related to Fund 10.
General fund revenue.
That's it. That's all I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Mr. Hughes, before you leave.
Yeah, I think that we're getting this money because we're essentially selling part of Memorial's facilities. I think we ought to give the money back to Memorial and let them use it as they see fit to improve their facilities. That's my last motion as a school board member.
I would second that.
Oh, we'll take it under advisement.
Well, I move to amend the motion to direct that the amount of $786,000 be earmarked for facilities improvements at Memorial High School.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Let's talk about that a little bit because, do you want to comment at all?
It's probably important. I would worry about making a decision about how to use those funds here at the board table without the board having more, a deeper understanding of potential financial need in the near future, and I would recommend not making that decision tonight, so as the board retains that flexibility for financial decision-making in the future. That doesn't mean the board couldn't decide at a future state to give all of it or a portion to Memorial, but I don't think that would be the right decision to make without further analysis. That pains me to say this.
All right, let me amend the amendment and request that in the upcoming budget process that the administration make a specific recommendation with respect to that sum of money, that one-time sum of money. All right, you okay with that one?
Yep, so,
All right.
so the motion is as amended.
Well, we have to vote on the amendment.
I just want to comment on the motion is that I just called them up to confirm it went into general revenue, and now it's kind of being taken out.
Well, if
These
the
things
amendment
happen.
passes.
These things happen.
Okay, then, we need to vote on the amendment. Mayor, your advisory vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion carries 7-0. So the main motion has been moved in second, so Mayor, your advisory vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, motion carries 7-0. So we'll come back with a proposal to the board on how to spend this money. Okay, is there any old or new business to be, thank you guys. Is there any old or new business to be brought before the board tonight? Seeing none.
May I move to adjourn?
Yes, you may.
Michael, you want to second it?
I would love to second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposition? And it's not 9 o'clock, Mayor.
We'll keep you all informed.